shrine. It's known as Masudano Iwafune, the rock boat of Masuda. Like so many of the great megaliths in Japan, its origins are completely obscure and mysterious. We see a combination of beautiful, clean-cut straight edges and rough, unfinished stone. Here we see a structure which is definitely man-made. What that suggests to me is that that kind of combination is part of the Japanese megalithic tradition, as far back into the past as it goes. The similarity in stone-cutting technique with Yonaguni, which has been submerged for thousands of years, is evidence suggesting the tradition could go back to the end of the Ice Age. I found megaliths all around the Asuka Valley, clustered into a few square miles, just as at Yonaguni. My guess is that in both places, the ancient artists found form in rock, and when they could, they would enhance that form to give it meaning and shape. Excited by these finds, which bolster the case for Yonaguni being man-made, I'm making another dive here. To take the search deeper, I join a group of divers working there with a remotely operated vehicle. The ROV can go down below the main monument to a depth of 400 feet to look for new evidence on the entire area which was once land at the end of the Ice Age. Since no marine archaeologists have ever studied this structure, I've asked Sri Sundaresh to join us. He's an experienced archaeologist from the Indian National Institute of Oceanography. What is that over this little hill?
Focus closer.
Can we turn the ROV to the right? The plan is for the ROV to spend the next week searching the seabed for unusual structures. Sundaresh and I will check in on the operation from time to time, but our part of the expedition will be to focus on the underwater structures that have already been discovered around Yonaguni. I start by showing Sundaresh some of the controversial features that have fueled the debate. What I want to do in Japan is to find out if the underwater structures at Yonaguni are man-made. Since no marine archaeologists have ever studied this structure, I've asked Sri Sundaresh to join us. First we proceed along what I think is the base pathway in front of the main monument at Iseki Point. A miracle of nature, as the German geologist Wolf Wichmann describes it, or the work of man? And what about the great steps, cut out of the bedrock by waves, leaving no debris on the path below, or cut by humans before the seas rose?
Iseki Point, the structure is more than 300 meters in length and then about 23 meters in height. Probably the way that structure was made by cutting existing rock, that must have acted as a harbor.
A harbor? Cutting the rock? So the first marine archaeologist ever to see Yonaguni thinks it's man-made.
In some places, 3 places I have observed, a person can easily go down till bottom and he can climb up, because in between there are small steps also, about half meter in height. Definitely that is a man-made. It's not a, I don't think it's natural.
Sundaresh's imaginative concept of a harbour certainly makes sense of the steps and the path, which could have been a channel for boats when the water level was lower. We planned 3 dives the next day to check this idea out further. As we're about to make the first dive, we get a typhoon warning. It seems not 1 but 3 typhoons are heading straight for Yonaguni.
The worst that we feared has happened. 2 huge storm systems have merged and the eye of the storm is passing right over Yonaguni. The waves are already going mad. The local people tell us within 2 or 3 hours those waves are going to be driven by 100-mile-an-hour winds and will pass right over the top of us. Everybody in town is battened down. We've had to abort the expedition.
Even the ROV exploration can't be completed. Trying to prove my case that the Japanese underwater structures are man-made vestiges of an Ice Age civilization, I took my investigation in a new direction. The Japanese people themselves. And their myths. My research has convinced me that myths can survive literally thousands of years handed down by word of mouth. One central myth of Shinto, venerated at shrines and celebrated on special days, speaks of the restoration of light after darkness. I've been following just such myths in the Atlantic and India, myths that speak of great floods that hark back to the end of the Ice Age. In the Shinto myth, the god of the sea encroaches on previously planted lands, upsetting nature. The sun goddess is so offended by his destructive acts that she retreats into a small rocky cave. As she vanishes from sight, darkness covers the earth. The other gods, distraught, try to lure her out of the cave so the world can be saved. They create a massive commotion with music and revels. And when curiosity gets the better of her and she emerges, they use a mirror to dazzle her with her own reflection while they close up the cave forever. The sun shines in the sky. Light is restored to the world. I think the story of the myth could be a metaphor for real events. Geology shows that while its coastlines were being flooded at the end of the Ice Age, changing loads on the Earth's crust sparked off volcanic chain reactions in Japan, darkening the skies for decades and perhaps bringing on a kind of nuclear winter. The imagery of the myth, with the sun disappearing into a rocky cave, is commemorated in Japan today by the sacred stones or iwakura we've already seen.
Iwakura is related to the small cave. Our ancestors lived in the cave. And also the goddess.
Sun goddess.
Yes. When something happened, she hid in the cave.
And the world became dark.
Yeah.
The rope or the sacred streamers are a kind of reminder of the locking of the door so that the sacred god cannot go hide again.
But is it possible that there were people here who experienced the terrors of the end of the Ice Age and left a record in myth? In most parts of the world, we know little or nothing about who was around at the end of the Ice Age. But Japan's an exception. It was inhabited by an ancient people whose sites have been excavated all over these islands. The oldest dating back to 16,000 years ago. Archaeologists call them the Jomon.
Every great human culture has something special, something that it does better than anybody else. For the Egyptians, it was the pyramids. For the Greeks, the representation of the human form.